5 years ago was the day my life changed, the day the Vorn arrived. It all started like a normal day. I had been up since 6 that morning, moving quietly through the house, so I would not wake anyone while I finished loading my pack in the hallway outside my bedroom. My mom heard me anyway, because she always did. By the time I made it to the kitchen, she had coffee going and eggs on the stove. She had the kind of focused expression she wore when she was trying not to show that she was going to miss me. I told her it was only 3 days, and she said she knew that, and we left it there the way we always did. The house smelled like coffee and faint leftover smoke from the fireplace the night before. The morning light came in low and sideways through the kitchen window, the way September light does when the angle starts to shift toward fall. My dad came in from the garage with grease on his hands from whatever project had pulled him out there before sunrise. He went straight to my pack on the kitchen table without being asked. He checked it the same way he checked it every time before any backcountry trip. He opened the first aid kit and went through it piece by piece to make sure nothing had expired and nothing was missing. He tested the flashlight and pressed the button twice to confirm the batteries were strong. He made sure the emergency blanket was in the front zipper pocket where it was easy to reach without digging through everything else. He checked the weight distribution and pressed the sides of the pack and adjusted one shoulder strap by about ½ an inch without explaining why. When he was done, he reached into the chest pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tucked it into the small front compartment and zipped it without saying anything about it. I did not ask what it was. I found out much later. It was a photograph of the 4 of us taken the previous Christmas on the front porch steps. There was snow on the railing, and everyone was squinting because the sun had come out at exactly the wrong moment. My little sister, Macy, came downstairs while I was finishing my eggs. Her hair was still tangled from sleep, and she had something in her hand she had been working on quietly for most of the week before the trip. She climbed onto the stool across from me and set it on the table and slid it toward me. It was a small bracelet she had braided herself out of blue and green nylon cord from the craft bin in the laundry room. She told me she had looked up the pattern online and that it had taken her 3 tries to get it right because she kept losing tension on the 3rd row. She pushed it across the table and told me to bring it back in one piece. I picked it up and worked it onto my left wrist. She watched carefully to make sure I did it correctly. Once it was on, she seemed fully satisfied and went to the cabinet for a bowl of cereal like the whole exchange had been a minor errand on a longer list. I finished eating and said goodbye to my mom. My dad shook my hand the way he did when he meant more by it than a handshake. I could tell by the way he held on a ½ second longer than usual that he meant a lot by it that morning. I picked up my pack and walked out the front door into a cool, clear September morning. I went down the driveway to the street without turning around to look at the house. You do not look back at things you expect to return to. Rio was already at the curb in his truck with the tailgate down and music coming out of the cab loud enough to hear from halfway down the block. Rio had been my best friend since the 3rd grade, and he had exactly 2 modes which were loud and moving. On the first day of a camping trip, he ran both simultaneously at full power. He had his window down and one arm resting on the door, and he was grinning the way he always grinned when something good was about to start. I dropped my pack in the truck bed and climbed into the back seat. Jabari was already there with his earbuds in and his head down over a brand new handheld weather scanner still halfway out of its packaging. Jabari had spent 2 weeks researching that scanner before buying it. He had shared a meaningful portion of that research with all of us through a group chat that had become increasingly one-sided on the topic. He was the kind of person who did not move on anything without understanding it from every angle first. Once he decided he was in, there was no version of him that was less than completely committed. He pulled one earbud out when I sat down beside him and told me the scanner had a dual frequency band and could detect pressure shifts from incoming storm systems up to 40 miles out. I told him that sounded genuinely useful, and he nodded and put the earbud back in and returned to reading the manual with the same focus. He gave everything. We drove to Neha's house next, and she came out with a precisely packed bag and her hair down. She climbed in and found my hand in the back seat the way she always did without looking for it. There was never any effort between us. Things fit the way they fit, and neither of us spent much time analyzing it. That is probably the right approach to something good when you are young enough to still have it in front of you. Tala was the last pickup, and she was already standing at the end of her driveway when the truck pulled up. Her pack was the most carefully organized any of us had ever seen up close. Every section was loaded with intention, and there were small pouches clipped to the outside straps and a tightly compressed bedroll buckled to the bottom frame with 2 metal clasps. Tala had grown up on her family's land outside the city, working alongside her grandmother from the time she was old enough to keep up. She had learned practical outdoor skills the way most people learn to drive, gradually and by doing and by making small mistakes until you stop making them. She knew how to read weather by watching animal behavior before a storm. She knew which plants were edible and which ones looked edible but were not, and she had never once made a wrong call on that distinction. She loaded her pack in the truck bed and climbed in front next to Rio and settled into the seat with the ease of someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be. Rio turned the music up, and we headed out of the city toward the mountains on a road we had all driven before. The drive took just over an hour, and Rio talked most of the way. Jabari continued with the scanner manual. Neha fell asleep on my shoulder, somewhere in the long switchbacks coming out of the foothills. Tala watched the tree line out the passenger window. With a quiet, focused expression I had long since stopped trying to interpret. She noticed things the rest of us did not notice, and she rarely explained what she was tracking, but she was almost always proven right about whatever it was eventually. We parked at the trailhead just after noon and loaded up and started the hike in. The main trail ran about 1.5 miles before Rio, and I turned the group off onto an unmarked path. The 2 of us had found it 2 summers earlier on a solo trip our parents had not been given the full details about. That path moved through denser timber for another mile before opening into a flat clearing beside a wide, shallow creek, about 3 miles from the nearest designated campground. It was the kind of remote that most spots labeled on trail maps never actually deliver. No cell signal reached it. No other campers had ever shown up there in all the times we had used it. The only sounds were the creek running over flat stones and the wind working through the upper branches, and whatever small animals were moving along the bank in the brush. We set up camp with enough light left to do it properly. Tents first, then the fire ring, then the food hang rope strung between 2 pines at the edge of clearing. Tala walked the creek bank, while the rest of us were still sorting gear. She came back to name 3 edible plant species within easy distance of camp, which she said was a strong indicator of healthy surrounding soil. She also pointed out a section of the bank where the ground was soft enough to dig for fishing grubs if it came to that. Rio immediately filed that information away. Jabari said he hoped it would not come to that. We ate when the sky was fading orange at the edges and the fire was steady. The conversation moved the easy way it does when everyone is comfortable and there is nowhere else to be and no reason to rush any of it. Rio told a story about a fishing trip he and his cousin had taken 3 summers ago. The story had gotten measurably worse and more exaggerated every time he told it. All of us knew that, but nobody stopped him because it was genuinely funnier each version. Jabari had the scanner out and was running test readings against a weather app on his phone to check calibration accuracy. We were miles from any cell signal, and the app had not updated since the parking lot. Neha had a small notebook out and was writing something. She turned slightly away from me when I looked over. I had learned that meant it was either personal or a list, and either way it was hers. Tala sat with her back against a log with her knees pulled up and watched the fire with the same quiet, steady attention she gave most things in the world around her. The fire burned down slowly, and the talking wound down with it. At some point, I tilted back and looked up through the tree canopy at a sky so clear and packed with stars, it almost looked like something that had been arranged. It was quiet enough to hear the creek from where I was sitting, and the air had the specific sharp cold that only arrives in the mountains after dark in early September. That was when I noticed it. A low hum. I felt more in my chest than heard with my ears. It was faint enough that I almost argued myself out of noticing it at all. I thought it was a canyon somewhere below us, amplifying the sound of the water or wind, finding a gap in the rock out of sight. I did not say anything about it to anyone. I sat with it for a few minutes, and it held at the same low, steady level. I decided it was nothing. I went to my tent and zipped the door and lay on top of my sleeping bag, listening to the creek until I fell asleep. That was the last night any of us fell asleep without something real to be afraid of. The next morning started the way the best camping mornings do, which is slowly and without any reason to move fast. Rio had the fire going before anyone else was up. By the time I unzipped my tent, he already had water heating and was crouched over flame with a camp fork and a look of deep personal investment in whatever he was cooking. The sky above the clearing was pale blue and completely clear, and the creek was loud in the morning, quiet, and for about 20 minutes everything was exactly what was supposed to be. Tala came out of her tent and went straight to the water's edge and checked something in the brush along the bank before she did anything else. Jabari came out last with the scanner already in his hand and set it on the flat rock beside the fire ring and watched the readout while he poured himself coffee. Neha sat beside me on the log nearest the fire with her hands wrapped around her cup and her shoulder against mine, and we did not say much because we did not need to. That was when the first explosion hit. It was distant enough that it registered more as a pressure change than a sound. A low rolling concussion moved through the ground and up through the log I was sitting on. It hit my chest in a way that felt wrong before my brain had finished identifying what it was. Everyone went still. Rio stood up slowly from the fire and looked at the tree line to the south. Nobody spoke for about 4 seconds. Then the second one came, and it was closer and louder, and it shook the pine needles down from the branches above us in a soft, dry rain. Jabari was already at the scanner. The chest hum from the night before was back, and it was stronger now, and it had a direction to it that I had not noticed before. It was coming from somewhere above the tree line to the southwest, and it was not the creek, and it was not wind, and I knew that now with complete certainty. Jabari held up one hand and turned the scanner toward the southwest and watched the frequency display shift. He said the scanner was picking up something on the secondary band and that it was not a weather pattern. Rio asked what it was, and Jabari said he did not know yet. A third explosion rolled through, and this one was close enough to feel in the teeth. Tala was already moving back from the creek. Her eyes were on the sky above the southern tree line, and her expression had shifted from calm to focused in a way that I recognized as her paying very close attention. Jabari got a signal burst on the scanner. It lasted maybe 6 seconds before it broke apart into static, but in those 6 seconds a fragmented emergency broadcast came through clear enough to make out 2 phrases. Major cities. Unidentified aircraft. Then nothing. The static held and did not resolve back into anything, and the scanner sat there reading the empty frequency like a flat line. We all looked at each other. Nobody said what we were all thinking, because saying it out loud would have made it real in a way that none of us were ready for yet. I told everyone to break camp. I did not frame it as a suggestion. Tala was already pulling tent stakes before I finished the sentence, and Jabari started packing his equipment, and Rio kicked dirt over the fire without being asked. Neha grabbed both our cups and rinsed them at the creek. I pulled my pack from the tent and compressed everything back into it with the kind of focused speed that skips over thinking and goes straight to doing. We had camp broken in just under 12 minutes, which was fast, but not fast enough for how I felt. I pulled the paper map from the front compartment of my pack and unfolded it on the flat rock. I traced the trail back to the trailhead, and then the roads from there toward Colorado Springs. Tala looked over my shoulder and pointed to a ridgeline about a mile northeast of our position. She said if we got up there, we would have a clear sight line to the southwest over the treetops. I said that was a first move. We hiked fast and did not talk much. The trail back was familiar for the first mile. After that, we were moving through unmarked timber, and I was reading the terrain from memory and from the map tucked in my chest pocket, where I could pull it without stopping. The explosions continued at irregular intervals as we moved. Some were distant enough to feel like weather. Some were close enough that the trees around us shook and a pair of birds flushed out of the upper canopy above us and did not come back. Each one felt closer than the last, even when the direction shifted. The chest hum was a constant pressure now and had layers I had not noticed before. It felt like more than one source stacking above us at the same time. We broke out of the timber onto the ridgeline just under 40 minutes after leaving camp, and the view to the southwest opened up, and all 5 of us stopped moving at the same moment. The ships were enormous. That is the only word that applied then, and the only word that has applied since. They moved in slow, coordinated arcs across the sky, like something that had been planned and rehearsed and was now being executed with complete indifference to anything happening below. There were 3 of them visible from the ridge at that moment. There were more further south that were too distant to make out clearly, but whose presence registered in the chest-hum stacking from multiple directions. None of them were shaped like anything I had a reference point for. Not anything from a movie or a book or a news story. They were wrong in a way that was hard to put into specific language. The scale was wrong. The proportions were wrong. The way they moved without any visible means of propulsion was wrong. The chest-hum was radiating off them in waves, and it pressed against my sternum with a steady physical weight that was different from sound. Rio said something under his breath that I did not catch, and I did not ask him to repeat it, because I was thinking the same thing. Neha had her hand tight around my arm. Jabari had the scanner up and was recording the frequency readings with a focused expression that I recognized as in processing something too large to react to. Tala was watching the ships with her jaw set and her eyes moving between them in a pattern, like she was tracking their movement and trying to predict it. I unfolded the map again and told everyone we needed to move toward the road. We came down off the ridge through thick timber and pushed southeast toward the nearest paved road. The ground machines appeared about 2 hours into that movement. We heard them before we saw them, a low mechanical rhythm underneath the chest hum that was distinct and regular and getting louder from the direction of the main highway. We stopped at the tree line and looked out at the road, and 2 of the machines were moving along it in opposite directions at a slow, deliberate sweep. They were large and low to ground and moved on a set of articulated legs that covered the asphalt with a heavy rolling gait. They had no visible crew compartment except for a single dark viewport near the front, and Jabari grabbed my arm and pointed at the viewport on the nearer machine as it passed below our position. Through the dark glass, there was the outline of something wearing a suit, not a uniform, not a flight suit, a full exoskeleton framework that encased the form completely, and the proportions inside it were not right. The shoulders were too wide. The upper limbs were too long. Whatever was inside, that suit was not human, and it was looking straight ahead at the road with the focused indifference of something doing a job it had done many times before. We stayed in the trees. We moved parallel to the road through the timber for most of the afternoon and into the early evening. We found an abandoned pickup truck on a back road a mile off the highway with the keys still in it. I drove and kept the headlights off for most of the route. The back roads were empty in a way that felt different from normal empty. There were no other vehicles moving. There were no lights in any of the houses we passed. Several had doors standing open. One had a car in the driveway with both front doors ajar, and a bag spilled across the passenger seat, like someone had grabbed what they needed in a hurry. I navigated by the paper map and by the ambient glow of fires that were visible on the horizon ahead of us, growing brighter the closer we got. The chest hum never stopped. It varied in intensity, but never went away. After a while, it stopped feeling like something external and started feeling like something that had always been there, and I had just not been listening for it. We reached the edge of Colorado Springs just after dark. The highway into the city from the northwest had a green distance marker sign still standing at the shoulder. The reflective lettering caught the truck headlights when I turned them on for just a moment to read it. Colorado Springs, 12 miles. I pulled the truck to the shoulder and stopped. Beyond the sign, the road continued into what should have been the outer suburbs and the first ring of commercial districts and the neighborhoods that spread out from the city center in every direction. None of that was there. The road ran into a zone of total destruction that started at the city limits and did not appear to end anywhere within a range of what we could see. What was there was flat and broken and dark in a way that a city is never dark. Collapsed structures visible as low irregular shapes against a sky that was lit from below by fires burning deep inside what remained. The tallest things still standing were partial frames sheared off at inconsistent heights. It looked like something had moved through the city in a specific direction and taken everything above a certain point. The chest sat over all of it like a ceiling. I turned the headlights back off, and we sat in the dark on the shoulder of the road with the engine off and the windows down, and the chest pressing in from every direction. The fires and the ruins ahead of us were the only light source in any direction. Nobody spoke for a long time. Neha had both hands pressed flat against the dashboard. Rio was gripping the door handle on the passenger side and looking straight ahead. Jabari had the scanner in his lap and was staring at the readout without saying what it showed. Tala had her window down and was watching the sky above the ruins with her head tilted slightly the way she did when she was tracking movement. There were 5 of us in that truck on the shoulder of that road. We were looking at the place where our city used to be. Not one of us had any idea what to do next or whether there was anyone left inside it who was still alive. 7 months had passed since we lost Neha and Rio. Neha died in the second week after Colorado Springs fell when a Vorn ground machine swept the strip mall we were sheltering in on the south edge of the city. We did not have warning, and we did not have cover, and she was gone before any of us understood what had happened. Rio lasted another 3 weeks. He went back into a hardware store we had already cleared because he thought he had seen a propane tank on a shelf near the back, and he did not come out. I heard the machine from 2 blocks away. I stood behind a collapsed wall with my hands against the brick, and I could not go in, and I could not leave. By the time the sound moved off, there was nothing left to go in for. I have not let myself spend much time on either of those 2 facts, because spending time on them does not change them, and we needed everything we had just to stay alive. So I'm going to tell you what the 3 of us built instead, because that is the part that kept us here. By the time 7 months had passed, Jabari, Tala, and I had developed a survival system that was methodical enough to function and flexible enough to adapt. It had kept us fed and hidden and moving through some of the most dangerous terrain on the continent. The foundation of everything was the RV. We had found it in a storage facility on the western edge of the city 4 months in. We were running low on options and needed something larger than a tent and more mobile than a fixed shelter. It was a full-size Class A unit in decent condition, and the first thing Jabari did after we got it running was start modifying it. He layered the exterior in salvaged mylar sheeting pulled from emergency supply kits and camping stores and outdoor retailers across a 2-county radius. On top of the mylar, he wove cut brush into a removable outer layer using wire and zip ties. From above, the whole vehicle looked like an irregular mass of vegetation, sitting still in whatever terrain we had parked it in. The mylar disrupted the thermal signature. The brush broke up the visual profile. From the air, the RV was invisible in any position that was not open flat asphalt, which we avoided by rule. Inside, the RV Jabari had converted the passenger side of the dashboard into a functional monitoring station using salvage components from 3 different sources pulled across 4 separate supply runs. He had a frequency reader mounted to the left of the steering column and a secondary display running off a repurposed tablet that showed a mapped radius of the surrounding area based on scanner input. It was not precise in the way that GPS was precise, but it was functional in the way that mattered, which was that it told us when something was coming. The scanner read the low-frequency emission that Vorn ground machines put out as a byproduct of their propulsion, and it could detect that frequency from approximately 4 minutes out in any direction. 4 minutes sounds like very little until you have lived long enough in a world where 4 minutes is the difference between being found and not being found. Then 4 minutes feels like a wide open runway. We had rules for movement that we never broke. We moved only at dawn or at dusk when the Vorn patrol patterns shifted during what Jabari had identified as a transition window in their sweep cycles. We used hand signals when ships were overhead because sound carried further than most people accounted for in open terrain. We kept the RV engine warm but not running whenever we were stationary, so we could move in under 40 seconds if the scanner fired. Tala managed everything related to food and water, and she managed it with the same precision she brought to everything else. She ran a rotating system of preserved and canned goods that we source on supply runs, and she supplemented it with fish from remote streams and wild edibles she identified on the move. She had not made a wrong call on a plant identification in 7 months. That is the kind of record that sounds small until you understand that one wrong call in that category ends a conversation permanently. By the 3rd month, she had us eating better than most people eat in normal times, which was not something any of us would have predicted at the start. 3 months into our movement, we had found something in the basement of a hardware store southeast of the city. It changed the way we thought about what was still out there. It was a military supply cache. Not large and not untouched, but clearly intentional. Someone had stacked sealed boxes of emergency rations and water purification tablets, and a partial case of signal flares against the back wall of the basement behind a false panel made from drywall and 2x4s. The boxes had military stenciling on the sides, and the rations inside were dated current. Someone had placed that cache after the invasion had started. That meant someone with military resources had been moving through this area and planning for people to find what they left. We took what we could carry and left the rest in case someone else came looking. That cache had kept us fed for 2 additional weeks, and more importantly, it had told us that organized resistance was not a rumor. The supply runs were where most of the danger lived. We planned every run the night before using Jabari's scanner data and Tala's knowledge of the patrol timing and my read of the terrain. We went in fast and came out faster, and we never took more than we could carry without slowing down. On this particular morning, we were running a supply run into a larger abandoned town about 11 miles northeast of our current position. The town had a hardware store and a grocery distribution warehouse on its eastern edge, and we had been planning the approach for 2 days. Jabari had the scanner predicting the next ground machine sweep through that corridor at approximately 9 in the morning. That gave us a window of about 3 hours to get in and clear what we needed before the next pass. We went in at first light. The town was quiet in the way that abandoned places are quiet, which is not peaceful but hollow. Every sound we made had too much room to travel. We worked the hardware store first and loaded 2 duffel bags with useful components that Jabari had specified on a list. Then we moved to the distribution warehouse on the eastern edge and started on the supply pull. That was when the scanner on Jabari's belt went off. The alarm was a single low vibration, He had coded it to produce instead of a sound, and he had it clipped inside his jacket, where he could feel it against his ribs. He held up one fist, which meant stop. Then 2 fingers pointed down, which meant get low and stay. Then he pointed at the scanner readout and held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes. The machine was coming 90 minutes ahead of Jabari's predicted window, which meant the patrol pattern had shifted, and his data was now wrong, and there was no version of that which was good. We were in the middle of a warehouse with no vehicle access. The RV was parked 3 blocks east on a side street, and 3 minutes was not enough time to reach it and get it hidden. Tala had already identified a section of the warehouse where a partial roof collapse had created a low crawl space between the fallen ceiling panels and the original floor. She was moving toward it before Jabari finished showing me the readout. We got into the crawl space and pulled mylar blankets over all 3 of us and pressed flat and did not move. The machine entered the street outside 30 seconds later. We could hear it through the warehouse wall. The mechanical rhythm of its movement was slow and deliberate, and it had a weight to it that vibrated the concrete floor under our chests. It moved past the warehouse entrance and then stopped. We lay completely still. The chest hum was overwhelming at that proximity, and it pressed against every part of me with a physical insistence that made it hard to think clearly. The machine sat outside the entrance for what the readout on Jabari's scanner said was 4 minutes and 11 seconds before it began moving again. It moved down the street, and the sound diminished, and then it was gone. None of us moved for another 2 minutes after the scanner cleared. When we finally came out of the crawl space, Tala went straight to the RV door, and I went to the back to check the supply bags. The close call had cost us. In the scramble to get under cover, I had dropped one of the duffel bags near the warehouse entrance, and there was no going back for it. The supplies inside it were gone. On the way out, I also noticed a fresh scrape along the rear panel of the RV where I had pulled it hard into the side street and clipped a concrete pillar. The scrape was cosmetic, but it bothered me in a way that small damage always bothers you when you are running on minimal margin. The worst loss was the scanner. Jabari had taken a hard knock against the ceiling panel getting into the crawl space, and the impact had cracked the casing on the scanner and bent one of the internal antenna mounts. He assessed it that evening and told us the detection range had dropped from 4 minutes to just under 3. Just under 3 minutes was still survivable, but it was not 4. That night, while Tala ran an inventory of what we had left and I checked the RV exterior for additional damage, Jabari picked up something on the damaged scanner. It was something we had not heard before in 7 months of listening. A fragmented military transmission coming from somewhere southwest of our position. It was broken and heavily encrypted, and he could only pull pieces of it, but the signal existed, and it was organized, and it was not a distress call. It sounded like communication between units that knew each other. There was structure to it, and a rhythm that suggested people operated with a plan, rather than people running from something. That distinction mattered more than anything else we had encountered in 7 months. Proof that someone somewhere was still fighting, and still organized enough to use encrypted channels to do it. Tala spread the road map on a fold-out table inside the RV that evening, and the 3 of us sat around it and looked at our options without pretending any of them were good. The Vorn patrol density in the Colorado corridor had been increasing for weeks, and the scanner data, even before the damage, had been showing shorter gaps between sweeps. The Southwest offered warmer terrain and more natural cover, and whatever was generating that military signal was in that direction. I pulled the photograph from the front pocket of my pack and looked at it for a moment the way I had been doing at the end of difficult days. My parents and my sister on the front porch steps, squinting into the Christmas sun with snow on the railing behind them. I put it back and zipped the pocket shut and told the others we would move at dawn, and that was the end of conversation. Southern Colorado in late winter is open country, and open country is dangerous country when you're trying to stay hidden from something that patrols from the air. The tree cover thins out below a certain elevation, and the roads run long and straight with very little natural interruption. The sight lines from above are clean in a way that worked entirely against us. We moved at dawn and at dusk the way we always did. We kept the RV off the main corridors and on back roads and county routes that Tala and I had been marking on the paper map with pencil lines that showed confirmed safe passage. The chest hum was with us every mile the same way it had been every mile since the ridge above camp 7 months ago. It varied in intensity, depending on how close the nearest ship was running. It never dropped below a baseline that I had stopped, noticing the way you stop, noticing the sound of a refrigerator until it turns off. Jabari ran the damage scanner continuously and updated his patrol predictions each morning based on the previous day's sweep data. The cracked casing had settled into a stable malfunction. The detection range was reliably just under 3 minutes rather than degrading further, which was the best outcome we could have hoped for from a broken piece of equipment. We had been moving southwest for 11 days when the terrain started working in our favor for the first time since we left Colorado. The land began to roll, and then to fold, and then to cut into the kind of canyon country that breaks up line of sight from the air in ways that flat ground never can. We found a 2-track dirt road running south along the base of a series of low mesas, and we took it and stayed on it for 3 days, and the scanner did not fire once. Those 3 days were the most stable stretch we had experienced since the trip. No alerts, no scrambles, no sound of machines in the distance cutting through the chest hum. The 3 of us moved through those days at a different pace than we had moved through anything in months. I noticed that Tala smiled twice. Jabari made a dry comment about the scanner readings being so quiet he was starting to wonder if it was broken again, and I told him not to say that out loud. No machines, no ships directly overhead. The chest hum was present but distant. Tala used the stability to work. She pulled the RV over twice each day at locations she had identified the night before on the map as having the right combination of soil type and sun exposure and water proximity. She foraged for 2 to 3 hours at each stop and came back with enough to supplement our preserved stock meaningfully. She found a stream on the second day that was clean enough to fill our water reserves without treatment. She found 4 species of edible plants along its bank, and one she said she needed to dry before using, but that would be valuable later. We went the full 3 days without a supply run, and we were not significantly worse off at the end of it. Jabari spent the stable stretch on the scanner casing. He had been waiting for a period long enough to open it up and work on the internal antenna mount without the risk of having to close it fast and move. He pulled the mount and rebent the bracket by hand and resoldered 2 connection points using wire and a tool he had improvised from a soldering iron tip and a battery pack. When he ran the diagnostic, the detection window had recovered to approximately 3.5 minutes. Not 4, but better than 3. He seemed satisfied with that in the way that Jabari was satisfied with things, which was quietly and without making a statement about it. The rest stop encounter happened on the 12th day. We had come back to using the main highway for a short connector stretch because the 2-track had dead-ended against a private fence, and doubling back would have cost us half a day. We came around a long curve and saw vehicles pulled off the highway shoulder ahead. Not abandoned vehicles, positioned vehicles. Someone had arranged 3 trucks in a loose triangle with the open ends facing outward, and there were figures moving between them. I slowed the RV and Jabari had the scanner up, and Tala was already at the side window reading the scene before I had decided what to do. She said they were not Vorn. She said the way they were moving was human. The way the camp was set up was defensive in a manner that suggested they had been doing it long enough to know exactly what they were doing. I pulled off the road at a distance, and we watched for 10 minutes before I drove in slowly with the headlights off. There were 7 of them, 4 adults and 3 teenagers, and they had been camped at that rest stop for 3 weeks, running a rotation of scouts that watched the highway in both directions around the clock. Their leader was a woman named Vivian, who had been a park ranger before the invasion. She had kept these 7 people alive through the winter using a combination of discipline and very good instincts about when to move and when to hold. She told us about the Voron ground patrol that had been systematically sweeping the highway corridor heading south and clearing anything with a heat signature detected. The patrol ran a consistent route, but the timing varied by up to 2 hours in either direction, which made it hard to plan around. Jabari sat with her for an hour and traded information. He gave her his sweep data from the past 11 days, and she gave him details about the patrol's behavior that refined the predictions significantly. He also traded a salvage radio component from his pack for a circuit board she had that he had been looking for since before we left Colorado. He said that board was the missing piece for something he had been working on, and he would not say more than that until he had it built. We stayed one night at the rest stop and moved on at first light. 3 days later, Jabari finished what he had been building. It was a signal disruptor. He explained it with a precise technical comm he used for everything. The short version was that it could broadcast a targeted interference pattern on the frequency the Voron ground machines use for their sensor sweep, while the disruptor was running the machine scanner, would return a blank reading in a cone approximately 30 degrees wide centered on the disruptor's output. The window was 90 seconds. 90 seconds of invisible. He tested it twice against the scanner's own reading to confirm the interference pattern was correct, and both tests came back clean. We had not needed it yet, and I hope we would not, but I had also been doing this long enough to know that hoping for something and getting it were not related activities. I kept the disruptor within reach from that point forward. I made sure all 3 of us knew exactly how to activate it without instruction in case Jabari was not the one holding it when we needed it. We needed it 4 days later. We were moving south on a narrow canyon road in northern New Mexico that had looked clean on the map and had been clean for the first 6 miles when the scanner fired. 2 minutes 40 seconds, which meant we were already inside the degraded range, and the machine was closer than the scanner had registered it. The road was a single lane cut into the canyon wall, with a rock face on the left and a drop on the right. There was nowhere to turn and nowhere to pull off. The sound of the machine was already audible from around the bend ahead. I told Jabari to run the disruptor. He had it out and powered before I finished the sentence. The RV was not stopped. I reversed hard back down the canyon road, at a speed that was too fast for the terrain. Tala braced against the cabinet frame. Jabari held the disruptor steady with both hands and watched the timer on his phone count the seconds. At 53 seconds, I found a dry wash cutting into the canyon wall on the right side, just wide enough to take the RV at an angle. I went in at that angle and killed the engine. Jabari pulled the Mylar cover from behind the seat and threw it over the windshield, and I got out and dragged the brush covering from the roof down over the front of the vehicle. The machine came around the bend at second 81. The disruptor was still running. It moved past the wash at a distance of maybe 40 feet. It did not slow and it did not turn. It continued down the canyon road, and the sound diminished and then disappeared entirely. We sat in the wash without moving for 9 more minutes. When we finally came out, Jabari powered down the disruptor and checked the scanner, and the corridor was clear. We drove back to the rest stop to check on Vivian and the others the following morning. The camp was gone, not packed and moved. Gone in the way that a Voron sweep leaves a site, which is completely and without anything remaining that could tell you what had been there. We sat with that for a few minutes by the side of the road. Then Tala said we needed to keep moving, and she was right, and we did. There was nothing else to say about it, and nothing that saying more would have changed. That evening I caught a clear look at a ground machine viewport for the first time since the highway outside Colorado Springs. We were parked in a dry arroyo off the main road. A machine moved through the scrub about 60 feet from the RV on what appeared to be a random sweep rather than a routed patrol. I was watching through a gap in the brush cover on the passenger side. The viewport on the machine's forward section was at eye level from where I was crouched. As the machine passed, I could see inside it clearly enough to make out the form of the exoskeleton suit in the operator position. The shoulders were not the right width for a human body. The upper limbs where they connected to the torso were too long, and the joint articulation was at a position that did not match any human anatomy I could count for. Whatever was inside, that suit was not built the way we were built. It was looking straight ahead with the focused patience of something that was not in a hurry, because it did not need to be. I did not dwell on it. I filed it and moved on, because dwelling on it was not something I could afford. We crossed into northern New Mexico that night under a clear sky, and the scanner stayed quiet. Just before midnight, Jabari picked up a strong burst of military transmission that cut out before he could pull more than a few seconds of it. He sat with the headphones on for 20 minutes afterward, trying to recover any trailing signal, and got nothing more. But the burst itself had been clear enough in those few seconds to confirm it was not a recording or a loop. The signal strength before it cut was stronger than anything we had received since leaving Colorado, and he said the source was not far. Northern Arizona in the high desert is a different kind of country than anything we had moved through in the previous months. The elevation keeps the temperature honest even in summer. The canyon systems cutting to the Ponderosa Pine country north of what used to be Flagstaff create a natural layering of terrain. It works against aerial detection in ways that flat ground and open scrub never could. We had been moving toward this region since the night Jabari picked up that strong military burst in New Mexico. It had taken another 3 weeks to get here through a route that avoided the I-40 corridor entirely. The chest hum was present the way it was always present, but it had a different quality here. Less layered, less omnidirectional. The sources felt further apart and fewer in number, and the sweep patterns we were logging on the scanner had longer gaps between them than anything we had recorded since Colorado. For the first time since the trip, I felt like the terrain was on our side rather than working against us. It was a small thing, but after months of open country and compromised positions, it registered as something close to relief. We found the canyon on our 4th day in the region. It was a side canyon off a larger system about 12 miles northeast of what used to be the Flagstaff city center, and it had everything we needed in a single location. A spring-fed creek running along the floor that Tala tested and confirmed clean without treatment. A south-facing sun pocket at the head of the canyon where the walls open enough to allow direct light for most of the afternoon. Dense pine cover on both rims that broke the sight line from above. A natural alcove cut into the east wall deep enough to park the RV out of the wind and completely invisible from any angle above the rim. Tala walked the canyon floor for 2 hours after we arrived and came back with a list written on the back of a folded supply manifest she had been using as scratch paper for months. She read it out loud in the flat, practical tone she used for assessments, and it took about 3 minutes to get through. She said this was the best site she had assessed in months. She said the soil in the sun pocket was workable, and the water was reliable, and the plant diversity along the creek suggested a stable ecosystem that had not been significantly disrupted. She did not say she wanted to stay permanently, but she started laying out the sun pocket with measuring out the same afternoon, and I understood what that meant. Jabari had the RV's technical setup rebuilt to a level that was significantly beyond what we had been running for most of the previous months. The scanner was fully repaired, and he had added a secondary antenna that extended its range back past 4 minutes for the first time since the supply run in Colorado. He had a solar charging array running off for salvage panels they had stripped from a roadside rest area we passed through in New Mexico. The panels fed a battery bank under the rear bench that kept the scanner and the shortwave receiver and the interior lighting running continuously without burning fuel. The shortwave receiver was the newest addition and the most significant one. He had been assembling it over the previous weeks from components sourced across 3 separate supply runs, and it had come fully online 2 days before we found the canyon. For the first time since the emergency broadcast burst on Jabari's weather scanner at the campsite nearly 4 years ago, we were pulling in clear, organized transmission, military frequency, encrypted but structured. The pattern of it was a pattern of units talking to each other across a network rather than broadcasting into the open and hoping someone heard. We listened for 3 days before Jabari started working on decoding the structure. He kept a log of transmission timing and frequency shifts and contact intervals in a notebook he had been using for scanner data. By the end of the 3rd day, he had mapped enough of the pattern to draw conclusions about the size and organization of the network generating it. He did not crack the encryption, but he did not need to. The metadata was enough. Transmission volume, frequency of contact, geographic spread of signal sources. It all pointed to something that was building rather than contracting, something that was being coordinated rather than improvised. We had been in the canyon for 11 days when I found the aircraft. I had been running a perimeter sweep of the canyon system on foot the way I did every 3 days to update my terrain knowledge and look for anything that had changed. About a mile south of our position, the canyon floor dropped into a wider section. That was where I found the tail section of military aircraft sticking up out of a rock slide that had come down the east wall. The rest of the fuselage was buried under several tons of rock, but the tail and a section of the rear compartment were exposed and intact. The markings were American military, and the damage pattern suggested the aircraft had come down under control rather than crashing, which meant the pilot might have survived. I spent an hour pulling accessible panels from the rear compartment and recovered a sealed waterproof case containing communications equipment that was designed to operate independently of any network infrastructure. I brought it back to Jabari. He had the case open before I finished explaining where I had found it. He spent the rest of that day integrating the salvaged equipment into the shortwave setup. By the following morning, the signal clarity on the military transmissions had improved enough that Jabari could isolate individual transmission threads and track them separately. The aerial patrol happened on day 14 in the canyon. We had no warning from the scanner because it was an aerial sweep rather than a ground machine, and the scanner was calibrated for ground emissions. The chest hum was the only advance notice, and it shifted in quality about 4 minutes before the ships appeared over the south rim. Jabari caught the change first and gave a hand signal for cover immediately. We got the Mylar deployed over the RV and ourselves and were flat inside and under cover in under 2 minutes. The patrol was 2 ships moving in a tight grid pattern at lower altitude than any aerial sweep we had logged before. They covered the canyon in 8 passes that took just over 6 hours. The grid spacing was narrow enough that each pass overlapped the previous one. This was not a routine sweep. Something about the pattern was deliberate in a way that suggested the Vorn were looking for something specific in this region and had narrowed their search area. We stayed under Mylar cover for the full 6 hours without moving and without speaking above a whisper. At the 2-hour mark, Jabari quietly checked the scanner and showed me the readout without saying anything. The grid pattern the ships were running was tighter than anything in his log data from the previous 4 years. He put the scanner away, and we lay still and listened to the chest hum shift and pulse above us as the ships crossed and recrossed the canyon on their grid. When the ships finally cleared the canyon rim and the chest hum began to fade back to its baseline level, all 3 of us stayed where we were for another 20 minutes without being asked. That evening, Jabari sat down with the shortwave and worked through the military transmissions with the new clarity the salvage equipment had given him. After 2 hours, he took off the headphones and set them carefully on the table and sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment before he looked at both of us. It was a look he got when he had finished processing something that was too large for a casual delivery. He said he had decoded enough of the transmission structure to understand what was being planned. He said there was a large coordinated military counteroffensive in the final stages of preparation. He said the operational language in the transmissions was not planning language. It was execution language. The timeline was not months. He said there was one other thing. He brought up the signal source mapping on the secondary display and pointed to a cluster of transmission origins that formed a rough line running northeast to southwest across the map. Our canyon was inside that line. We were sitting in the middle of the projected engagement corridor. That was when Tala said what she said. I wanted to find the military and make direct contact and plug into whatever was coming. Jabari was not sure that 4 years of operating independently had left him with the instinct for trusting a large organized structure again, and he said so directly and without apology. Tala listened to both of them. Then she said they should boost the signal relay output on Jabari's shortwave and transmit a locator ping on the military frequency and let the military find them instead of the other way around. She said it quietly and without drama, and it was obviously correct, and both of them knew it. Jabari did not argue with the logic of it because there was no logic to argue against. He started modifying the transmitter output that same night, and he worked through most of the following day to get the output level and the ping interval calibrated correctly. 2 weeks later, the military recon unit walked into the canyon. There were 4 of them on foot with full gear and worn boots. They had the particular exhausted focus that people develop when they've been moving through dangerous terrain for a long time without stopping. They had been tracking the locator ping for 9 days across difficult country before they found the source. Their unit leader was a compact, methodical woman who introduced herself by rank and last name and got directly to the reason they were there. Their unit leader sat down with Jabari's notes and the shortwave setup for about 20 minutes before she confirmed what Jabari had decoded. The counteroffensive was real, and the timeline was weeks, not months. They needed the signal relay that Jabari had built because the canyon's position in the corridor made it a critical node in the coordination network they were assembling across the region. Jabari was already asking technical questions before the unit leader finished the briefing. She answered each one with the patient precision of someone who had been waiting to find exactly the right person to ask them. That night, I took the photograph out of my pack and held it under the small light above the rear bench without opening it all the way. I sat with it for a few minutes, and then I folded it back along its crease and put it in the pocket and zipped it and turned the light off. Outside the canyon, the chest hum had been running at a constant elevated level since the aerial patrol 2 weeks earlier. It was coming from multiple directions now in a way it had not come from multiple directions before. The Vorn had detected the military buildup, and they were repositioning, and they were doing it fast, and the scanner was logging new patrol signatures from vectors that had been clear for weeks. Something was coming, and it was not going to wait much longer. All 3 of us knew it. None of us said it out loud, because saying it out loud would not have made any difference to how it arrived. The relay was running at full capacity by the second day after the recon unit arrived, and Jabari had not slept in 2 days by the time he admitted it. He did not stop working. He kept the headphones on and monitored the transmission network. He fed positional data back into the coordination system. The unit was running through the night and into the following morning. He did it with the focused relentlessness of someone who had been waiting for something useful to do for 4 years and was not going to let the opportunity pass because he was tired. The recon unit set up a secondary position on the canyon rim above us and ran a hard line down to the RV so that Jabari's output fed directly into their field communications array. The chest hum changed the following morning. It had been running at an elevated baseline since the aerial patrol 2 weeks earlier, but the change that came on the 3rd morning after the unit arrived was different in character. It was layered in a way we had not heard since the worst days outside Colorado Springs. It was coming from the northwest and the southeast simultaneously, which meant the Vorn were not patrolling from one direction. They were surrounding. Jabari caught on the scanner at the same time. I felt it in my chest, and he gave the hand signal for full cover without looking up from the display. We ran the Mylar over the RV and killed everything that was not essential to the relay and got flat. The recon unit on the rim went silent on the hard line for 40 minutes. Then they came back with a single transmission that said contact was imminent on the northern perimeter and to hold position. We held. The canyon was completely quiet except for the chest hum and the distant sound of whatever was moving through the terrain to the north of us. It was a specific quiet of waiting for something to start that has already started somewhere you cannot see. The first military aircraft came over from the south about an hour later. We heard them before the scanner registered them because they were running low and fast, and the sound arrived before the frequency signature resolved on the display. Then there were more of them, and the chest hum fractured into something different as the Vorn ships changed their formation in response. Ground detonation started to the north and east at distances that were close enough to feel through the canyon floor and far enough that we could not see anything from inside the RV. Jabari had the shortwave running and was pulling in military transmission traffic in real time. He narrated what he could make out in a steady, low voice. He was completely calm in a way. He was always completely calm when the information was moving fast enough to require it. He said there was a ship down to the northwest. He said ground units were engaging on the highway corridor 2 miles east. He said the military was pushing through from 3 directions, and the Vorn response pattern was fragmenting, which meant the Vorn command structure was not keeping up with the engagement rate. Tala and I sat with our backs against the rear cabinet with our knees up. We listened to the battle through Jabari's voice and through the canyon walls and through the chest hum that was shifting and breaking apart above us. Neither of us tried to talk over it. Neither of us tried to look out the window, because there was nothing to see from inside the Mylar cover, and looking would not have made the waiting shorter. We had spent 5 years learning how to wait, and this was the last time we were going to need that particular skill. There was nothing to say that was more useful than staying still and staying quiet and letting Jabari work. The ground machine entered the canyon from the north entrance at midday. The scanner fired and Jabari called it out, and I had the disruptor in my hand before he finished a word. The machine came down the canyon floor at a deliberate pace, and the chest hum from it specifically was a different register than the ambient field surrounding it. Jabari said 40 seconds to visual contact from our position. I ran the disruptor. The 90-second window opened. On the canyon rim above us, the recon unit opened up on the machine from 2 positions simultaneously. The sound of that engagement was the loudest thing I had heard since the first days outside Colorado Springs. The machine stopped forward movement and turned toward the rim. The recon unit shifted position and hit it again from the second angle. The machine came down 40 feet from the front of the RV with a sound that shook the canyon walls and sent a wave of dust rolling through the space. The disruptor window closed at second 87. Jabari checked the scanner. The corridor directly around us was clear. The unit leader came down from the rim and told us to hold position until she gave the all clear, and we held. That was the last direct contact we had with a Vorn ground machine. The battle continued in the surrounding terrain for another 4 hours after that. Jabari monitored it all and gave us what he could make out. What he could make out was a picture of something collapsing. Vorn command signal was fracturing across the shortwave bands as the military counteroffensive hit the primary relay infrastructure that the Vorn used to coordinate their ground and aerial operations. Ground machines in the surrounding area began shutting down mid-sweep, according to scanner data. Their movement patterns went from deliberate and coordinated to erratic and then to nothing. The chest hum that had been the constant background of every single day for nearly 5 years began to lose its coherence. It did not disappear all at once. It thinned. It dropped in layers the way a sound drops when its source is losing power rather than moving away. Each layer that fell away left a quality of silence underneath it that I had not heard since the night before the first explosion at the campsite. Then the last Vorn ship that was visible from the canyon came over the south rim in a descending arc that was too slow and too low to be controlled flight. It crossed the canyon from rim to rim and went down on the southern ridge beyond our sight line without a detonation. It did not explode. It just stopped and fell away. Something falls when the thing keeping it up simply ceases to function. That was the end of it. The silence that followed felt enormous in a way that took a moment to understand. The scanner went quiet. Not the quiet of a clear corridor or a gap between sweeps. The quiet of a frequency that had nothing left to put on it. Jabari sat with the headphones on for 30 seconds after the scanner cleared. Then he took them off and set them on the table. A single repeating military transmission came through the shortwave speaker in clear, unencrypted language. The engagement was over. I read it off the display twice before I accepted that it said what it said. Jabari looked at the display, and then at me, and then at Tala, and none of us moved for a moment. Then Tala reached past me and pushed the RV door open and stepped outside in Jabari, and I followed her. We had not walked out of that door without checking the scanner first in nearly 5 years. All three of us noticed it at the same moment, and none of us said anything about it. There was nothing that needed to be said about it, and anything we might have said would have been less than what the moment already was on its own. The canyon was quiet in a way that canyons are quiet when nothing is wrong with them. The chest hum was gone, not reduced, gone. The air had a quality to it that I did not recognize at first, and then I understood that what I was not recognizing was the absence of pressure. The air just felt like air. From somewhere further up the canyon, a figure emerged from a gap in a rock wall that I had walked past 40 times without knowing it was an entrance to anything. Then another from a different gap. Then a family of 4 from a shallow cave system in the east wall that was almost entirely concealed by overgrowth. People had been in this canyon system the entire time we had been here, and none of us had known about any of the others. Tala moved toward them before Jabari, and I had fully processed what we were seeing. She walked out into the canyon floor and introduced herself to the first person who emerged. By the time I stepped away from the RV, she was already talking to 3 different people at once with the easy directness she brought to everything. The recon unit came down from the rim about 20 minutes later. The unit leader walked up to us and did not say anything dramatic about it. She confirmed what the transmission had said, and then asked if any of us needed medical attention, and we told her we did not. Global Vorn neutralization. The win was real. The world it applied to was not the one any of us had packed a bag and left on a September morning 5 years ago. Nobody standing in that canyon was under any illusion about that. I reached into the front pocket of my pack and took out the folded photograph. I unclipped the braided bracelet from my wrist, where it had been since the morning Macy put it there. I held both of them in my open hand in the afternoon light of the canyon. My parents were gone. Macy was gone. Neha was gone. Rio was gone. The house on the street I had walked out of without looking back was gone. Everyone who had been inside it was gone. All of that was real and was going to stay real regardless of what had just ended. Jabari was already in conversation with the unit leader about what the signal network looked like going forward and what role the relay setup could play in the coordination of whatever came next. He was not avoiding anything by doing that. He was just Jabari, and Jabari moved toward the next useful thing, because that was what he knew how to do, and it was the right thing to know how to do. Tala had a circle of 8 or 9 survivors around her. She was learning names and asking questions. She was going to be the reason that group stayed organized and fed through whatever the next phase looked like. She was already the reason we had made it here. I stood where I was for a few more minutes with the photograph and the bracelet in my hand, because I was not ready to start yet. I was not ready to put the weight down and pick up whatever came after it. I needed one more minute of standing in the canyon with the quiet sky above it before the next thing began. The photograph was creased along the fold from 5 years of being opened and closed in the dark. The bracelet was faded, but the knot Macy had tied at the clasp was still tight. Both of them had made it. It was the first morning in 5 years where nobody had to check if it was safe to go outside, and I stood there and let it be that for as long as I could.